The Prime Minister will lay out the foundation for his government's multi-billion-dollar stimulus package in a speech today. As Chief Anchor Kieran Gilbert reports, Scott Morrison will also make a passionate plea to Australian businesses.
The Prime Minister's speech today is about laying the foundation for the stimulus package that the government will announce later this week. And the PM will argue while COVID-19 is a health crisis, it's having very real economic implications, potentially greater than the global financial crisis. In the speech, the Prime Minister says the epicentre of this crisis is much closer to home. The GFC impacts were centred on the North Atlantic, and back then China was in a position to cushion the blow, he'll argue. This time round, it's a very different situation. And while the federal government's taking the lead in responding to coronavirus, he says big business particularly also has an important role to play. In a message to big business, Mr Morrison will say, we need you to support your workers by keeping them employed. Hold on to your people. You will need them on the other side. A message of solidarity to the business community from Prime Minister Morrison in a very important week for the nation's economy and for Scott Morrison's Prime Ministership.
And unions are pushing the Morrison government to make casual workers the priority as part of the looming coronavirus stimulus package. The Cabinet is working on the final details of the $10 billion plan, which is due to be announced later this week.
Walking the walk and talking the talk.
We will do everything to ensure that the Australian economy remains resilient.
The Treasurer putting the final touches on the coronavirus stimulus package, believed to be worth around $10 billion.
What we have seen is supply and demand side constraints, and that's where our package will be focused.
Helping businesses one of the top priorities, with wage subsidies and business tax incentives under consideration.
And it will be focused on supporting those people and those businesses that need our support through this period.
Unions argue those in most need of support are casual workers who are ineligible for paid sick leave. The ACTU concerned the 14-day self-isolation period would leave many with a difficult and possibly dangerous choice.
We're worried that these workers will have to choose between feeding themselves, paying the bills or going to work.
Our focus is in ensuring that businesses are flexible, given the stresses and strains that we will see.
Industrial Relations Minister Christian Porter will sit down with unions and business groups on Tuesday to discuss the crisis.
It is a very, very complex issue, and that is why it is important for this meeting to go ahead.
Clearly, there is a substantial issue with workers who don't have paid sick leave, so they should be looking at ways to deal with that pressure.
The $10 billion stimulus package would wipe out the promised surplus, but it may just be the beginning, with the Treasurer casting forward.
But then there's also the budget in 8 weeks' time, and I think that's also important to keep that in mind.
Concerns too for Parliament House, where thousands of people from across Australia converge during sitting weeks. Crossbench Senator Rex Patrick says that's exactly the sort of mass gathering that should be avoided, as he calls for the budget to be brought forward.
So we may better serve the Australian public and ensure that we are able to sit unfettered by bringing forward the budget period.
All of those options should be on the table.
Trudy McIntosh, Sky News, Canberra.